This is a flavor wheel. And the real advantage, there are two advantages to this flavor wheel. The first is how simply it is set out. If you take a look at it, you'll see that there's a big center, and then there are large categories just outside the center, the white center. There are smaller categories outside that, and there are then very, very much smaller categories out that. So I'm going to refer to the center circle, the first circle right here, not the center, the first circle as categories, the middle circle as subcategories, and the outside circle as details. So you have categories, subcategories, and details. Categories are divided into things like fruity, floral, sweet, nutty, cocoa, spices, roasted, a few things like that. Large, high elevation terms, categories. Each one of those is broken into a few, or perhaps more, subcategories. So under fruity, for instance, you might think of dark fruits or medium fruits or really light fruits. Dark fruits would be berries and dried fruit. You might then go to some kind of a citrus as a lighter fruit. And then under citrus, you would have, lemon and lime and orange and grapefruit and those kinds of things. And I think that's a very clear way of teaching here, because most of us learn tastes not from drinking coffee, but through every other means. And then we might apply what we've learned by tasting everything else when we encounter a cup of coffee. So what I would first of all do, if I want to taste test my Sumatra Lintong right here, I would take a slurp, swish it around my mouth, and then pose 4 questions. I refer to these as aroma, taste, body or characteristics, and finish. And I put aroma first because most of us tend to sniff our coffee before we drink it. The aroma of this coffee right here is what I would refer to as a little nutty. And there is just a hint of chocolate in it. That's what I smell when I do that. Okay, now we're going to move to taste. And I'm going to look around my flavor wheel right here. And I'm going to say, well, it tastes a little roasted. It tastes a little sweet. It tastes, as I said before, it tastes a little chocolate. It doesn't have many fruit overtones to it, but you'll go to things like very dark, perhaps dark fruit. Some people might find some very dark red berries in there, or very dark red plum or black plum in there. And I think you'll find a little bit of dark chocolate or perhaps chocolate. There is a sense of sweetness, but it is not sugar. I mean, I know it's technically sugar, but it doesn't feel like sugar. It doesn't taste like sugar. And you notice that there are certain regions of your mouth that are reacting as though they're tasting white sugar, but most of them are not. Most of them are interacting with the biology of chocolate, which is a nut, and therefore it tastes a little bit nutty as well. So we've gone through aroma, and we've gone through taste. Now I want to talk about body or characteristics. Body is primarily a function of how many solids are in this cup of coffee right here. You probably cannot see through it. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of solids in there. Coffee roasters and coffee baristas will use a little machine called a TDS, total dissolved solids, and they'll dunk that into here. And the higher the TDS, obviously, the more solids you have in there. Now, the reason that's interesting is because the more solids are in there, the more body that particular cup has. You know the difference between the texture of chocolate and the texture of honey. The texture of honey and the texture of milk. The texture of milk and the texture of water. The textures are important in terms of being able to articulate what this thing is all about that you're tasting or drinking at the moment. This is going to taste fairly thick. It's solid, it's substantial. Back of our labels, we try to indicate what that's like. Another characteristic is it's long lasting. The last sip I had was what? Maybe you had your watch, you looked at your watch, maybe 3 minutes ago, 4 minutes ago, something like that. It tastes like I swallowed it about 20 seconds ago. Finish is the mouthfeel that you have once you have drunk this. When you breathe in through your mouth, after you swallow the coffee, do you feel an intense sweetness, or is it just kind of like breathing in at any point during the day, not having drunk any coffee? This produces an intense sweetness. The interaction of the coffee with my tongue, my palate, and my saliva makes things very cool, just instead of cold. And I can feel that at least part of the way down my throat. It stops feeling cool and cold when it gets to about my back jaw. But the finish, therefore, can be long or short, and it can also produce a very cool, invigorating, refreshing taste in your mouth, which is very pleasant. I find it at least very pleasant. So those are the 4 items that I would start with. The most important one is the one about tastes, and that is taking a look at this cheat sheet right here, which tells you all sorts of tastes that are resident within coffee, identifying the one that jumps out at you, and then locating that on the center circle, which is characteristics, and then going further and further out to the periphery of this graph so that you can perhaps say, well, it's not only sweet, but it's also citrusy, and see, that kind of reminds me of grapefruit, or words to that effect. At that point, you are miles ahead of where you were last week. And the more you get used to this and paying attention to what your tongue tells you when it encounters this coffee, I think the more you will enjoy drinking coffee, not just perhaps as an energy pick-me-up, but also as a genuine food, which is meant to be comforting and comfortable. And that's what I like most about coffee.